Hi, I'm Alistair, and in this video I'd like to describe how I made this nuclear lab themed escape room puzzle. So it's a sealed steel box, originally a sandblasting cabinet, and from the looks of all these warnings on the outside, you might reasonably assume it contains some sort of nuclear material, a sample from a zombie serum, or some other hazardous compound. So the only way for players to safely interact with that is to insert their hands into these protective gloves on the side. And the only way for them to observe what they're doing inside is via these monitors which display live feeds from video cameras located inside the enclosure. Now inside the box there'll be some sort of simple task to perform. It might just be to locate, identify or assemble a component, or to activate some sort of mechanism. But the exact nature of the task is not actually that important. What's interesting is the constraints. Firstly, by having to wear the gloves, which limit your movement, dexterity, and also tactile feedback about what it is you're touching. And then secondly, by only being able to indirectly observe those movements via these camera feeds. And the cameras might be positioned at different angles within the enclosure or only show a limited range of vision. And while I've positioned these three monitors directly on top of the box here, these actually could be located some distance away and require another team member to describe what they can see to the person that's standing here. So you've got layers of abstraction in this task, both in control and also in feedback. And what I'd like to do is to talk through the design process which I used to build this puzzle and show you how you can use that same approach to turn almost any mundane task into an interesting and fun challenge. So normally when you're making something, one of the basic rules of functional design is that the way you use it should be intuitive and the interaction should be as effortless as possible. For example, in website design there's something called the 3-click rule, which suggests that a user should be able to find any information on a website in no more than 3 clicks starting from the homepage. When you're using a microwave, you shouldn't have to look up the manual every time to work out what these little icons mean, or remember the sequence in which you have to press buttons to select the time and power of cooking. And the handle on a manual tool should be shaped and weighted to naturally fit in your hand. When you're designing a puzzle, however, you want the opposite. A puzzle is something that's been deliberately contrived as an unnecessary obstacle. Its only purpose is to provide challenge and satisfaction from overcoming it. Now, if the method of solving a puzzle were obvious or straightforward to do, it wouldn't be a puzzle. So one way of creating puzzles is to start with a relatively simple task and then deliberately introduce obstacles, limitations, indirectness or roundabout methods to make it more challenging and hopefully more interesting to achieve. For example, a very common escape room puzzle is a hidden message written in UV ink, which is only revealed when viewed under a blacklight. Or there might be a message that's written around a corner that you can't directly see and you need to angle a mirror to view it in the reflection. So both those obstacles require the use of an additional tool, but you can also have obstacles that are based on knowledge. Many puzzle games use encrypted messages written using ciphers or codes, and they can only be understood by looking up meanings in a translation sheet or following a process of mechanical translation. So that's an obstacle that's formed by a layer of knowledge abstraction. And you can keep adding layers of obscurity, indirection or friction until you've turned something very trivial into something that feels quite rich, mysterious and rewarding to solve. Think of it like taking a very simple core action, say pressing a button, and then asking yourself how many steps removed can I make the player from that button? Maybe the button's inside a box like this, and instead of pressing it directly, you need to manipulate it via some sort of tool or via gloves. Maybe the button itself doesn't look like a button. It's disguised as part of the environment, a brick and a wall that you have to press. Or maybe it only becomes obvious when illuminated by a light source. Or maybe simply pressing the button once doesn't do anything. Maybe it has to be pressed a certain number of times, held for a certain duration, pressed in a given sequence, or timed to coincide with another action. And also, it's important that every design choice, like these gloves and cameras, doesn't just add mechanical difficulty, but it actually reinforces the story. In this example, players need to feel like they're working in hazardous conditions, and that makes even a simple action like turning a knob or examining a serum of chemicals seem more dangerous, more dramatic, more consequential. And you can further enhance that with lighting, sound, special effects. I'm here in a well-lit workshop, but if you were to place this in a laboratory setting with warning lights and an alarm, it would feel much more dramatic. Now, I do need to add a slight note of caution here, because while our objective is to challenge the player, it's not to frustrate them. And that is definitely a risk, especially if you're adding false leads or misdirection. Puzzles must always be fair, and I strongly believe that as a puzzle designer, your objective should always be to create the opportunity for the player to feel smart, to be the hero in the story. I've never understood escape rooms that proudly advertise that their games only have a 10% escape rate or whatever. I mean, anyone can make an escape room that few people can escape from. That's easy. What's hard is making it challenging but satisfying to overcome. And that really only comes about by careful design and testing. So now that you've heard about the design methodology I used for this, let me go back to give you some more details about this particular puzzle and how I constructed it. So as I mentioned, this is a sandblasting cabinet. You can buy these new for around £100, but you can also often pick them up second hand for much cheaper on eBay and Facebook Marketplace, etc. Now, I don't know if that's because sandblasting is a hobby that people abandon or whether they upgrade to better cabinets, but a basic unit is fine. You really just want a fully sealed enclosure. Now, you obviously could just build a box yourself instead, but what's nice about using a sandblasting cabinet is that it's made of metal, so it's sturdy and robust enough to stand up to escape room usage, and also it has these sealed glove holes ready built into it. Now, usually it would have a clear observation panel on the top, which would allow someone working here to look inside, but I've actually removed that and replaced it with a solid opaque panel instead, so that players are forced to rely on the camera feeds to see what's going on. But if I just lift up and remove that cover, I can show you the setup inside. So here you can see the gloves inside, which are attached to the cabinet by these sealing rings. And these gloves are replaceable, which is obviously a very important consideration for escape room props. And then you can see the 3 cameras which I've installed. There's one here, there's one on this side, and there's also one right inside here mounted between the 2 glove holes. And these are all mounted on different sides of the enclosure, pointing in different directions. And the box has a convenient access hole on the side of it here. This was originally designed for the air hose that powers the blasting gun, but it's perfect for threading the video cables from the cameras out to the monitors outside. Now, at the back of the box, there's a built-in light, which is intended to help you see what you're blasting, but I don't actually need that because these are night vision cameras. So they use infrared light, which sounds very fancy, but these are actually just sold as basic vehicle parking cameras for cars. And amazingly, they only cost a few dollars and they work perfectly for this application. Now, the monitors I'm using, these are also sold as in-car monitors, and these cost about £10 each. And you connect the output from the cameras to the monitors using a standard RCA video plug here. So even with 3 cameras and 3 monitors, the total cost of the electronic components here is under £50. You could add more cameras and more monitors, or else perhaps use a single larger monitor and an input select switch to toggle which video feed was displayed. Now, even though I don't need the light because I've got my night vision cameras, it does give me a convenient built-in 12 volt DC power supply inside the enclosure, which is controlled by this switch on the outside here. And because the cameras inside and also the monitors mounted on top all run at 12 volt DC, I've wired everything so the players have to press that switch to activate the monitors before they can see what's happening inside. So that's just adding another constraint and another step in the solution process. So it's this combination of sturdiness, the built-in replaceable gloves, and convenient access points really make this sandblasting box a really great foundation for an escape room prop. In fact, it's durable enough to withstand constant handling, and it gives you lots of flexibility to add in wiring for electronics or further sensors if you wanted to have an electronic interaction inside the box. Although personally, I think that it's nice to keep this puzzle completely analog. Because it's completely enclosed, you could even use this as an opportunity for a messy puzzle involving liquids, which is normally considered somewhat out of scope in escape rooms. For example, you could have players have to reach inside and mix various chemical compounds together to identify which caused a reaction. So if two of them actually contained vinegar and baking powder, they would fizz up, for example. And then players would have to hold the bottles up to the camera feed to be able to identify the labels on the side of the bottles that caused that reaction. And if they did spill any fluids, it would be easy to clean the chamber to reset the puzzle ready for the next game. So if you ever find yourself stuck with ideas for coming up with a new puzzle, one possible approach is to start with a simple, clear task which is thematically appropriate for your game, and then ask yourself, what can I do to make this less direct? You could add a tool requirement, a perception barrier, a layer of translation, and you can repeat adding more and more of those layers until you feel it is appropriately challenging without becoming unfair. And remember, what makes a puzzle enjoyable isn't just difficulty. It's that feeling of aha that the player gets when they finally overcome these unnecessary obstacles that you've placed in their way. Now, this is not the only approach to creating puzzles, but hopefully it should give you some ideas if you find yourself stuck. If you'd like to discuss any aspects of puzzle creation, or this particular puzzle, or any of the other projects on this channel, do please check out the Playful Technology Discord server. I'll put a link in the description below. If you'd like to support me to create more projects like this in the future, do also please check out my Patreon, which I'll also link. Otherwise, I just want to say thank you all very much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Okay, cheers, bye.